This is Thor. He's 15 years old and typical of his breed, a good sturdy Fel Pony. I'm Bob Orrell, and I'm going to take Thor and his mate Lucy back along the old Packhorse routes of the Lake District where they belong. The camping gear and the food weighs about 100 pounds, so they've got to be well balanced. Go on. It's very, very important to get the balance, because if this was too heavy, this pack on this side, the tendency would be to pull the pack right over. And on a very narrow, rocky ledge, it's quite critical. And if she just overbalanced one time and the weight is too far on one side, she could go right over. So it's extremely important that you get them balanced. In fact, I carry a little spring balance with me, and in the morning I'll weigh each pack and fit them on so that they're absolutely balanced. I suppose it's 200 years or so since packhorses carried ship's cargo, wool and provisions from Ravenglass clear across the Lake District. Ravenglass, to me, is a nice, quiet backwater in a very noisy Lake District these days. Unfortunately, it's getting to be that way, but so far, it's still a quiet backwater. It has a history going back a couple of thousand years to the days of the Romans, who discovered it as a most magnificent natural port. I'm a Manchester lad, really, but I hated the towns and used to escape to the Lake District as often as I could. I never had any money, so it meant hitchhiking up the old A6, sleeping rough under hedges and in barns. In the past, I've been a lighthouse keeper, then a forestry worker in the West Highlands. I tried my hand at deer stalking. I spent a couple of years on an oil rig and instructed rock climbing with the Outward Bound. But now I'm back in forestry. I've always wanted to wander the old Packhorse trails and get away from hordes of people. The Lake District's full of these old routes. I know they'll never be used again for commerce, but what a grand way for a family to see the countryside without worrying about bed and breakfast vacancies. This is Esdale, and it's along this trail that cattle, having been landed at Ravenglass from Scotland and the Isle of Man, were driven in herds along the banks of the Esk, over Hardknot Pass to the markets in Kendal. It's said that they used to shoe the cattle like horses to protect the hooves from rough ground.
Wait, 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 wait.
This is Edmund Porter, the Esdale and Ennerdale huntsman. Morning, Edmund. Have you been out today?
Yes, we've been up top end of Esdale.
Ah, grand. How did you get on?
With a good morning. Yes, we're out for a lamb worrying call at Penny Hill.
Aye.
And we took him out of the fields and ran him for an hour and 20 minutes. Caught him down in the bottom.
Ah, grand.
Yeah.
You know, there's an awful lot of criticism about hunting in this part of the world. Is it a sport, or is there a purpose behind it?
Well, in our country, it's more a service to the fell farmers. It's, you know, the way of keeping the foxes down amongst the fells.
There's no other way?
Well, it isn't in the fells, no.
Right, well, I'll be seeing you, Ed.
Okay, Bob.
Cheerio now.
Bye.
I do believe they made the kill this morning on the vicar's lawn. Aye, well, that's all part of life in the Dales. You can soon get away from people along these quiet trails. But it's not always so quiet in Esdale. This is Lal Ruddy. It's been a great favourite of the Esdale Valley for many a year. It's a real tourist attraction, there's no doubt about that, but it wasn't formed as a tourist attraction. It was formed in 1871 to serve the Whitehaven Iron Mines Company, who were mining up at Boot Village there. The name Ratty, a lot of people have some fanciful ideas how it came about. Some people say it's because it looks like a rat's tail. from the fells. Well, I can't believe that one myself. The best, and I think probably the real reason for the name, is that the fellow who built it in the first place, built the railway line, was called Ratcliffe. And his men would obviously probably refer to him as Ratty, and it would follow Ratty's Railway and then on to Lal Ratty, and it seems to me to be the best explanation of the name.
Come on, get up, we'll leave you here.
We've done about 10 miles now. That's a fair day's work for Lucy.
Come on. Here you go. Come on. Go. Come on, Tom.
A good-looking river, the Es. It drops quickly down the upper valley, but lower down it meanders gently through meadowland to the sea. There's an interesting building or two on its bank. There can't be many Dales churches that have been founded as a result of a drunken orgy, but this one, St. Catherine's of Esdale, according to legend anyway, was. The story has it that a cousin of the first Earl of Carlisle and several English noblemen had a wild drinking party on board a ship just before it left France for England. And shortly after leaving harbour, the ship struck a rock and went down, and everyone on board perished. Now the Earl of Carlisle, who was quite a religious man and had already founded Calder Abbey, decided he'd like to found a church up in Esdale to commemorate the death of his kinsman. And he called it St. Catherine's because the ship went down on St. Catherine's Day, about the year 1120. Amongst the graves lies that of Tommy Dobson, who founded the local pack of hounds. He was a small fellow with a stoop, but a great huntsman. It's time to leave the easy trails of the valley now and give the ponies a touch of the rough stuff. They'll be in their element there and they'll not need much help from me. Well, Fel ponies are the native breed of the Lake District. They were used donkeys years ago for carrying the packs, and a sure-footedness is bred into them. I've proved this so many times. They have an instinct which it's difficult to describe. I can only say that they bred to the fells. They bred to be able to recognise dangerous ground, to be able to recognise dangerous drops when you're going round some of these very high ones. Now, if you take a lowland bred pony, an Arab horse, which looks very nice, it would kill itself, for sure, because it just wouldn't know. These ponies, many people say that the Fel pony is thick. They say that the Herdwick sheep are thick, but by God, they're natives of the Lake District and they know what they're about. And these little ponies surely know. This is the old Corpse Road over Burnmoor between Boot in Esdale and Wasdale Head. It got its name because in the old days there was no consecrated ground in Wasdale, and when anyone died, the coffin was carried on the back of a pack pony over to St. Catherine's to be buried. Wasdale, well known for having the deepest lake, the smallest church and the highest mountain, Scorefell, in England. It's well known for many other things too, particularly to the climbers. It's the home of British mountaineering. This is where it all started. At the Wastwater Hotel, a famous man lived, a chap called Will Ritson. He had the title of being the biggest liar in Britain. So as well as the deepest lake, the smallest church and the highest mountain in England. It had the biggest liar in Britain, Will Ritson. Rain, liquid sunshine of the Lake District they call it, and regular visitors soon find out that there's plenty of it. Just around the corner from here is the wettest spot in Britain, Seethwaite. The rainfall is 125 inches a year. That's as high as me sitting on Thor. Esdale, one of the region's most thickly forested valleys. There's a lot of work for the forester here, and it's vital to the country's economy, seeing that timber is our second highest import. For a long time, the Forestry Commission has been a target of the critics for their policy of planting battalions of boring conifers in regimented rows. The man who can explain that is the Commission's district officer, Mike Scott.
Well, the Forest Commission started up in 1919 after the First World War with a policy of planting a reserve of timber in the event of another emergency. The trees were put in without any thought to amenity, but merely to get as much area of land covered as quickly as possible. Inevitably, it meant that we used the fastest growing species available and didn't bother much about the look of them. We had hard straight lines on the boundaries and hard internal lines as well. The trees that we used were mainly the fast-growing conifers from the west coast of America, Sitka spruce, Douglas fir, and some trees from Europe, Corsican pine. The amenity bodies, Friends of the Lake District, were very vociferous against this, and we eventually reached agreement not to afforest any more of the main central 300 square miles of the Lake District. We use timber nowadays for pallet wood, for building, for house building, for manufacture into pulp, and then into board or paper. And we use quite a lot, of course, in a rural community like this for fencing. This is a smaller size material. We have become very much more amenity conscious ourselves. We've become very much more conscious of the need to make the trees fit into the landscape. And I think it's about 12 years ago we got the services of a very eminent landscape architect, Dame Sylvia Crow, who advised us and taught our foresters, and taught us all, I think, to deal with trees and landscape sympathetically.
What's the Forestry Commission's attitude to people wanting to get into the forest?
We do welcome people now into our woods. We have got a number of waymarked footpaths, and we also have a forest trail. But there are a lot of people who don't wish to be managed too much, who like to be able to wander freely. And of course here at Esdale they can do just that.
Oh boy. Go on. It's not a bad day today. We should do about 8 miles. It'll be rough going over Scarth Gap past the Buttermere, but if the weather holds, it'll be okay.
Your ancestors used to do this every day. Come on.
Buttermere, it's a fine old English name, much like the name Mary. And there was a girl of that name lived at one of the Buttermere inns some years ago, and she was quite a looker, and in fact was called the Beauty of Buttermere. The story goes that one day a well-to-do gent came up to the hotel to stay, and he got to like her, and eventually they went away to get married. And of course the local folk, this was a great thing for a girl from the hotel to be marrying a toff. But they only got as far as Carlisle on the honeymoon when the man was arrested, and apparently he'd been impersonating an earl. In those days this was a terrible crime, and in fact he was whisked away and he was eventually hanged. And the poor girl came back to Buttermere and worked away for a while, but eventually she married a farmer from Colbeck, and she died and is buried in the same churchyard as the famous John Peel.
Come on, Lucy. Come on. Come on. Steady now. Steady. Come on.
Up the top of the dale here is a classic Lakeland farm. Tom Richardson and his brother have farmed it for 40 years. There's more to Dale's farming than a bit of quiet shepherding.
Come on, Lucy. Good girl. Come on. Don't be frightened of getting your feet wet. Come on. There you are. Good girl. Come on. Come on. Swing them. Come on. Afternoon, Tom. What's it like farming herdwits and tourists?
Well, it's a bit of a job, but you put up with it, you know. There's a lot more tourists now than there used to be.
Aye. Well, they're both crops, really, aren't they?
Ah, they are. Ah, they are. There's a lot of people live in valley of tourists, and they're your neighbours, they're your friends.
Yes.
And you put up with it, and your sheep maybe don't graze on the fell as content as they used to do, you know, when there wasn't as many people.
Are there many restrictions imposed on farmers?
Oh, there's a few, like, you know,
Aye.
such as camping and things
Yeah,
like
they
that.
tend to restrict you a bit.
Ah,
But
yes.
You normally provide the facilities for them anyway.
Oh, I provide if anybody comes along and wants a night, like, you know, they
Yeah.
stay with us and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Oh, I just like they always have done.
The motorist grinding up Honister in first gear won't realise that 500 feet above him, men have been quarrying slate for 200 years. At one time, they used wooden sledges to cart the slate down over the screes to the valley. It must have been one hell of a job. Today, you're likely to see this slate in the front of your bank in the High Street.
Come on, son. Come on. That's about enough for one day. Good fella. Come on. Come on.
Borrowdale, immortalised by Hugh Walpole's novel Rogue Heris. On a more factual note, stories about the smuggling of black lead, or wad as it was known, are legion. At one time it was valued for dyeing cloth, but later it was the foundation of the Cumberland pencil industry, still in business today. It was so valuable it cost £4 a pound, and guards were stationed at the mines to prevent locals from scratching through the spoil heaps. Of course, even on a trip like this, you can't see everything in the Lake District. Skiddaw, Langdale, Coniston, Esthwaite, Troutbeck, Rydal, Styhead, Kirkston, Hawkshead, Come on, come on. Whoa! Steady now. This is a county unclassified road, and they've every right to be coming over here on motorbikes. But by God, if it was any wider, it'd be followed by the flaming motorists and the damned juggernauts. Come on. When you're coming down to Endless, it's easy to see that the dales and lakes were gouged out by the snow and ice as the receding glaciers bit into the floors of the valleys. This place is littered with bits of volcanic rock. Come on. Rough country again, but the Fel ponies are at home in it. Good to know that the Fel Pony Society is thriving. I suppose there's no better place to meet them than on a Packhorse bridge. The secretary is Miss Peggy Crossland. Aye, from Rossett. It's grand to see quite a few Fel ponies out this morning.
Yes, well, it's such a lovely day, isn't it, for it?
It sure is.
And it's just the right country for them.
Uh-huh. And they're becoming popular now. I mean, well, they'd always been popular, but they had a recession for a while. But are they coming back now?
Oh, yes, coming back like anything, yes. We can't get enough broken ponies. There's not such a big sale for unbroken ponies, but, oh, there's a big demand for quiet broken ponies for riding around this kind of thing. And
aye. What sort of people buy them these days?
Oh, mostly people that want a family pony. See, they'll carry anybody. They'll carry the father or the children or anybody. And there's a lot going for riding for the disabled. We've quite a lot for that job because they're gone for that too.
Do you know of them being used at all in the Lake District for what they were intended, for work?
One or two still, yes, there's one or two still, chiefly shepherding. That's rather a nice job for the Fel pony. There's quite a lot used for shepherding.
Aye.
And I think, as way things are, I think we'll probably see a lot more being used because the way petrol is and everything. There's a lot of farmers talking about using more on the farms.
Yeah. Do you find that when you're riding a Fel pony, the farming community tend to come across and have a yarn?
Oh, yes. Oh, a lot of them do. Oh, yes, a lot of them say, oh, yes. Of course, in the old days, they called them Fel Gallowers, and they'll say, oh, that's a real Fel Gallower.
Grand. OK, cheerio. Come on. Come on.
Goodbye.
Come on, Lucy. Come on. It's a good girl. Come on. What Endless is suspended high above the Borrowdale Valley, and it can only be reached by a very narrow road, more suited to ponies than cars. Derwent Water. In the early days of tourism, one of the Borrowdale hotels had a cannon mounted on a terrace so that visitors could fire it and listen to the echoes rebounding round the valley. Today there's no cannon, but my, there's plenty of noise. The clouds have come right down on High Street now, and it's a good job we came off there when we did. Of course, in the old days, these ponies could go all day. In fact, they had to. The trains of them had set out from Kendal, heading for places like Whitehaven in the west, going over the passes. In fact, to all sorts of places. And they carried everything you can imagine. They've carried mails, and they've carried groceries, they've carried everything in the time. And they used to say that the old Packhorse men would judge the weight of a load according to the weight of a young maiden. I don't know if they were in a habit of picking up young maidens in those days. Anyway, they can go all day, that's for sure. Lucy's carrying about 100 pounds now, and of course Thor's carrying my weight. And they don't feel it at all until they come to something very steep, of course, and then we usually get off and walk. And the Packhorse men were the same. I think they used to treat them kindly, much the same as a transport driver today looks after his vehicle. If it breaks down, of course, there's no income. Come on, Em. Steady. Steady, steady. Be over the edges a bit. Steady. Come on, Lucy. Philia. Just another little lake 100 years ago until the thirsty residents of Manchester and the northwest decided that they could do with some water. So they built a dam, and this is what we have today. And who would have thought that you can turn a tap on 90 miles away and draw water out of a beautiful lake like this in the Lake District? Water, and that's the story from here to the eastern limits of the Lake District. Haweswater, Mardale, all collecting water for the thirsty northwest. The Packhorse was eventually replaced by road transport, and any lorry driver would recognise Shap Village on the A6. Now, of course, the motorway has taken over. If this is progress, then we are better away on the old Packhorse trails.